last time I spoke with this gentleman, we were going to have him back more regularly, but he got real busy. He was on a panel. We were talking about the 1619 Project, which has since won a Pulitzer Prize. And now he's out there in the MSNBC streets, winning Emmys as well. And he's now the host of Into America, the podcast. Let me welcome back to the show, Mr. Trymaine Lee. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. But the soundtrack, that's how we doing it. I hear AZ Firm. That's how we doing
come
it.
On, Nas.
Okay.
Come on. Yes. Yeah, man.
That's
I mean, Meghan Markle during her interview with the Queen Oprah Winfrey, and I did Queen Mother more on purpose today because they're the only queens I'm rocking with. Talked about the monarchy as the firm, and I thought that was interesting.
It's a crime family. It's a crime family.
Yes.
Been one for a very long time.
And let me say, can I just, I'm just now waking up, and I don't want to say I'm woke at all, but I'm just now coming to this realization that every single thing, even my fairy tales, because I don't know any little girl that didn't grow up with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. And we all imagine ourselves, Black girls alike, as the princess, and we were all conditioned and trained to want a prince one day to come and sweep us off our feet. But what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And so listening to Meghan Markle, I was one of the 2 billion people that tuned into her wedding. I enjoyed it. The Black choir and her Black mama and Serena and them and all of the, it was beautiful. But I'm like, why is this something that we all aspire to? Like, how crazy is this indoctrination into white supremacy that we?
I'm about to say, they say white supremacy is a hell of a drug, and clearly it is. But one thing I was thinking about watching that, I did watch a piece of that last night, is even with her, who could basically live a white life, skin as fair as it wants to be, if she's catching it, imagine, and just how silly, obviously we know how silly racism and white supremacy really is, but it just, the notion that she has something else inside of her, the notion, not that it has to be reflected in her skin or her hair, right? The notion that she has some Blackness in there just throws them off, and that's it's wild.
I would say, though, because she's so light, that it's almost like she's the betrayer, and they had to kind of double down to let y'all know that she's not like us. Whereas if she were dark skinned, you wouldn't have to say anything.
It's evident,
you know what I'm
right?
saying? We can accept, okay. But she's the one that could, because she's popular.
Yeah.
She's the one that could change the paradigm. She's more dangerous than any of them. It's almost like Plessy versus Ferguson. Until they looked at his feet on that train. Was it Plessy? Yeah. Got on that train. They were like, wait a minute. Your feet are too big to be white. Whatever that meant. I guess it's like, hey, wait a minute. He got on the white train and passed all the way through.
Crazy.
Until he didn't. And that's kind of like the craziness. Like, what is race? We all started in Africa. So what does this even mean? We all have something else in us. All of us. Yeah. What does this even mean? What are you actually saying to us? And I think we need to start to dismantle that. But I'm looking for the monarchy to go away. I think Queen Elizabeth should be the last to sit on that throne. And that should be it. We should be done with worshiping at the feet of unworthy men.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be ending anytime soon. I think they love it. They're addicted to it. They can't.
Who's they? Who's addicted to it?
I think the big we, excluding we, but I think the big we, I think their country, I think that it upholds the face of white supremacy in a certain kind of way. And I heard someone say recently, and I don't know if it's 100% true, but it made sense to me, is that there are no diamond mines in England. And when you think about the great wealth and the jewels and everything that crown sits upon has been stolen, right? Through violence and bloodshed. They colonized the brown Black world and took everything. They're not going to let that face crumble easily, right? Because they need that veneer, right? They need it to look nice. They need Black people and brown people across this country, the world, to aspire to that and see that fair skin and that crown and all the history connected to it. They need us to love it, and they need to love it. They need to make sure it has that pretty veneer on it. So I don't know.
All right. 866-801-8255. And even as you're saying that, I'm struggling. I'm struggling right now because if we all agree that it's not a thing, it goes away. And it's just that simple, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even the money that we spend, that we use, is an agreement that it has value, because it has no value, right? but we have agreed that it has value. So therefore it does. Now, as an American, it's in our best interest that this has value,
Mm-hmm.
which is why we don't really say too much about Gaddafi and what he was trying to do and why he's not
Mm-hmm.
here anymore. We don't talk too much
United
about
States
Saudi
of Africa.
Arabia. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we don't talk about why Khashoggi will not be avenged by this administration or any other. We don't talk about those things, Trymaine, in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Why shouldn't we? Or how should we?
Well, I think there are too many among us who benefit from these structures remaining in place, and that's it. And that's it, right? We know that it's not only costs us as Black people, and it always costs us in our blood and opportunities and agency, and I would argue our true citizenship. It costs us a lot. But on the other hand, there are people who have continued to benefit from white supremacy, and they always have. And so, even if in a time now we're about to start this trial of George Chauvin, I mean of whatever
But
Chauvin's
be
first, Derek
careful,
Chauvin,
Derek.
Derek Chauvin,
Yes.
Derek Chauvin, about to start this trial. Um, we again, we know that they just benefits too greatly from it.
And before we get to this Derek Chauvin trial, jury selection started today. Your latest podcast is about the coronavirus vaccine, which I thought was interesting because I thought you were going to talk about it from one perspective, but you
Hmm.
got into it from Black people actually want to get it, but they can't.
Yeah, I think
Talk 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 about that because I was like, the narrative is we don't want it.
hmm
And then I've been on these airways, bringing on every kind of doctor I can find to talk about why not we have to do anything, but why this is not Tuskegee, why this is different. But you came at it from a different angle. Tell us about, first of all, the origin of this particular last podcast of yours, and then what we should glean from it.
Yeah, I think the narrative that Black people are just so distrustful and mistrustful of the medical field, which many of us are, rightfully so, that's a reason we're not getting the vaccine is quite frankly lazy. And it also absolves a lot of people of the responsibility to penetrate communities that you've never penetrated, to set up systems and structures of delivery that you just have never done before. Right. So they're scratching their heads. How can we get the vaccine there? The people just don't want it. And as long as you say that people don't want it and they're fearful, then you don't have to try. But from everyone that I've been talking to, certainly there are some contrarians among us and folks who are like, look, I ain't taking it. But a lot of people that I know are trying to sign up to make sure we're protecting ourselves and our communities. And I heard a Black doctor, I've been paying attention to these Black doctors. I trust Black doctors, right? Saying that we cannot be the only community that's not protected. And I think a lot of people, that's resonating with a lot of Black folks. And so the conception of the story is, let's just disregard that lazy narrative for a second and talk about the same things that made Black folks more susceptible to catching COVID and more likely to die from COVID. It's the systemic and structural nature of the way we live and we die. And that's the same thing that's preventing us from getting the vaccine. You have a Trenton, New Jersey, right? Very segregated, poor, high unemployment rate, very Black, very brown, very immigrant. But then you have Princeton 20 minutes away. You have all these other communities, these wealthy white, lily white suburbs all around it. And they're getting these vaccines in these beautiful clinics and these doctors got the TVs and it's orderly. And in the Black community, they can't find a vaccine. You have 7 different portals. You got to sign up for this list, sign up for that list. You got to jump through hoops. Do you have access to Wi-Fi? Do you have the privilege of sitting there and refreshing and refreshing and refreshing? No, you don't. And they know it. And so this episode was, let's break down the mythology around this and let's show one example of how, this community is actually stepping up to kind of fill a gap where the city and state haven't been able to, with the partnership with the state. The state says, you know what, we'll have a certain allotment of vaccines. Let's go to the faith community. Let's go to our pastors. Let's go to the churches to see if they have folks. And guess what? Folks are lining up, signing up with the help of the pastors. So, it's a good story. It was a good one to do. I mean, it's tough because we're still dealing with all the inequity and all the nonsense that we deal with in every other aspect of our lives. But this one has a little bit of a bright note to it.
I say this like voting, all the people, oh, our vote doesn't matter. Well, why do they work so hard to try to prevent you from
Mm-hmm.
voting? Why did Georgia just pass a whole gaggle of we just talked about this last week too. Georgia's like, oh, y'all not going to do this again. Matter of fact, we're going to, right now under SB 241, voters would need to be 65 years or older, absent from their precinct, observing a religious holiday to file an absentee ballot. To provide an absent, they have to prove that they're providing care for someone who's physically disabled and required to work for the protection of the health, the life, or safety of the public during this entire time that the polls are open, in order to get an absentee voting ballot in Georgia. They just passed it. So last week They passed a whole bunch of, shutting down polling places, making it impossible for people to vote. So there's going to be a backlog, of course, of folk at places and waiting in long lines. And now they're just chipping away because obviously the vote matters.
Yep.
And if this vaccine wasn't so important, white people wouldn't be coming from their neighborhoods lying about their and coming in and taking the vaccines in Black neighborhoods and flying to other countries to get it as well, if it wasn't an important thing to get. So I'm just looking at how the movements are made. But talk a little bit, Trymaine, about race, because when you say, racism is the reason why Black people were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, a lot of folk can't digest what that means.
Yeah. I mean, well, it starts off, in a very simple kind of way. When you think about what redlining is, they literally drew a red line around certain communities on a map and said, we will not insure home ownership in this red area. It's too risky, right? So that means Black folks who were, due to segregation, forced into certain communities, could not build wealth because they could not buy homes because they could not get the mortgage insurance, right? So you have that compounding generation after generation. Inside those spaces, you have crumbling infrastructure, right? From your pipes. Let's think about what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi right now. Let's talk about Flint, Michigan, right? So you're clustered in these spaces. They're already under-resourced, infrastructure issues, transportation issues. You have, let's think about a place like West Harlem and some of these communities that are surrounded by bus depots. So everybody's breathing it in. So all the kids have asthma. You talk about the actual literal air we're breathing, or you think about that 85-mile stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, where there are like 100 refineries. And this is where Black people have been clustered in to live, right? And so all of those things, access to, in those spaces, in that red line, which you can take a map today and, overlay it to that old map, access to fresh foods and vegetables and adequate schools and adequate access to healthy, access to quality education, right? All of those things create just a toxic storm that makes you more susceptible to all of the maladies, the virus included, because now it's densely populated, right? So now you're just living on top of each other in crumbling buildings with lead in the in the paint still, right? You can't get to work because where can you get a bus? You got to take this bus to that. It's just a whole cacophony of issues. And that's what we're talking about, structural issues, even beyond just the racism, meaning we don't like you because your skin is brown. We will beat you in the head with something. It's we're going to create this environment and put a literal wall around you and access to all the opportunities, access to the healthy foods, access to education that can get you out, right? And it's just a compounding effect. And so it's pretty straightforward when you just drive through one neighborhood into the next and you'll start to see it. And it's not by accident. These are byproducts of policy, right? So things are working exactly as they've been intended to.
Well, what do people say? Well, why do you stay there? Why not just move, Mr. Lee? Why are you in these places?
Well, again, going back to this idea of wealth, right? The average wealth for a white family is 10 times that amount of the average Black family. And a lot of that wealth comes from home ownership, right? We could do a whole 7-hour series just on home ownership and what has been stolen, right? The violent economic dispossession of our people, right? But that lack of access to that wealth. You think about the World War II, they're coming back and they're creating Levittown, creating these suburbs where low interest home loans and all the insurance, creating a pipeline to wealth. If you have the wealth to get out, you could leave. But again, we're continually starting from zero or starting from 3 and then being knocked back because of some other hostile policy. And so it's not as simple, right? As the average Black family is not sitting on a big pot of wealth because we haven't been able to inherit that wealth from our families. What we inherit is the stress and trauma of being Black in America.
Well, you're here.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get out?
Luck. I happen to come from, working people, right? So like most of the people I know where I'm from in South Jersey, just working people, not very educated people in terms of going to college and all that. But it takes this is all I got. Like if this doesn't work, I don't I don't know. Some luck and love. So I think it's not that it's impossible, but it takes all of the things to come together. Right. So my family, like many other families, have had our struggles and family issues and substance abuse, incarcerate, all the things that we have in our families. But by the grace of God and luck and just fortitude, and again, I consider a lot of it is luck because there are some of people in my family raised the same way. We come from a good family, a family that don't have much, but just a good family. And I got I got lucky. But also, you have to be you can't have many missteps. So I've been fortunate enough. There's a saying I heard, recently that said, if you can't be good, be safe. So fortunately, I wasn't always good, but I was mostly safe. So I've avoided incarceration. I've avoided a lot of things by the grace. Quite frankly, I'm lucky. But all of us aren't so lucky. So I'm just thankful. And we come from strong people, right? We come from people who we're not gonna break. We're gonna bend a lot. And if you have some fortitude and some luck, you make it.
Well, try is in your name.
Yeah.
Trymaine is here.